Hello everybody, this is Havoc and welcome to my tutorial for absolute beginners in Manor Lords. This is an ongoing series on the channel where essentially I take a strategy game that I am very passionate about that is set to release, and I do a tutorial that is designed for the person who has maybe never played a strategy game to an extent, to potentially veterans who maybe have played strategy games, but there's things that they just don't simply know about Manor Lords itself, considering that the public hasn't played the full game. So thank you so much for being here. I am super excited about this. And right before we get ready to rumble, a quick word: I am associated with Hooded Horse. If you want to know what that means in full, you can check out the video that's in the description. Enough about that. But today's video, we are going to go deep and dive in hard into the settings, and then into a new game, what that looks like, and then into your user interface overview. This is standard for the series as well, because, well, there's a lot to explain, and I feel like if you do make it through all this, there will be timestamps that you will be able to fully comprehend what you are looking at when you're at your main screen. So let's get right into it. We're going to start with our settings. All right, we're going to start with gameplay here. So your autosave, this is pretty straightforward. You have a different autosave settings. I will say that the autosave is rather intrusive at the moment. Basically, your game doesn't freeze, but it will definitely pause, and then it will say, hey, saving finished, and then it will continue on with your day. So if you are wanting to minimize that, I suggest the 15-minute autosave mark, and I also do suggest autosaves in general, because this game is launching in early access, which means that there will be bugs, there will be crashes, there will be things that you can't manage, and if you set your autosave to off, you will simply lose everything as you progress. 15 minutes is a great time interval. Gives you a lot of stuff to do because you're going to want to play this game at a normal to maybe ×2 speed for the most part. So get you a lot of room, wiggle room, a lot of things to do. Your allow assignment to multiple control groups. This game does feature small tactical battles, and as such, you are going to need to manage units. Now there's a peaceful mode, we'll get into that in a tiny bit. But if you do have where you are managing your militia units or your retinue and mercenaries, you're going to be able to assign them to groups that you can recall using the top number bars 1 through 0. Now, say I had 4 units of militia, 2 of them archers, 2 of them spearmen. What I could do is I could select all of them, put them in control group 1. Then I could select just the spearmen, put them in control group 2. The archers, put them in control group 3. So that when I hit 1, selects all, 2 selects spearmen, 3 selects archers. That is the allow assignment to multiple control groups. If I had that off, I would not be able to assign units to multiple groups. Pretty cut and dry there. Typically, for me as a Total War player, I don't like having multiple control groups in that format because it confuses me, and it's just not how I play. So I will have it off. However, if you want to, by default, be able to select all your units anywhere on the map altogether, that's what you would need to do. Tutorial pop-ups. I have about 70 hours in this game so far, so I don't need tutorials anymore, hopefully. But even if you're following this tutorial series, say live or whatever, I would definitely recommend the tutorial pop-ups anyways. Gives you nice little things to do, and you're going to be good there. Now, reaction when the enemy was spotted. This is one of my favorite features of the game, and it's such a relaxing thing to know that you're going to be safe when something happens. So this is anytime the AI Lord pops up, anytime raiders pop up, or when bandits are spotted, the game will by default slow down. So say you're on ×3 speed because you're just twiddling your thumbs waiting for winter to go through or something, and all of a sudden enemy approaches, the game will default to speed 1, and you'll be able to address the situation. You do have the ability to pause the game, which means that when someone is spotted, it will automatically stop. For someone who is just beginning and you are truly the absolute beginner, I recommend pause, because then when something happens, the game will pause. You're like, whoa, what's going on? You'll hear the horn that signifies the unit's there, and then you'll know what you need to do. But we're going to do slow down for my playthrough, and we'll be good there. Cosmetic day and night cycle. There is a cosmetic only day and night cycle. I'm going to have it off by default because for me, recording gameplay, night cycles don't do a lot for me. I have to wait for the night to go through before I can really go and do the things that I want to do. So if you want to do that, by all means, do it. Have fun with it. It's a great thing. It looks amazing. It's just not good for gameplay recording. That's the only thing for me. Your graphics. This is what's going to be most heavily dependent on your hardware. So for instance, you can see what my settings are. On this menu screen alone, I'm getting about 230, 240 FPS. So take that what you will. It's not a lot going on. But what I will say is that if you are wanting to figure out something for your computer, the biggest things that will affect FPS, I said that wrong, FPS, is your shader quality and your shadow quality, volumetric clouds, and even terrain texture resolution. Those are going to be big ones. And your view distance. So really everything. It's fine. You want to mess with it as much as you will. I have a very powerful computer, thankfully, so I can run all of these and I'm pretty much good. Volume is up next. This is pretty cut and dry. Adjust the volume settings how you want to deal with things. And in this case, for instance, ambient voice lines, they're great, but I definitely want those down a little bit because we don't want to be constantly interrupted by them. But you can totally do all of these things that you want. I recommend ambiance. I call it ambience at 100% because it is really, really good. The master volume, or the music volume rather, the music is fantastic in this game. I would listen to it at 100 if I wasn't recording. And so definitely play with the music. It's an excellent album. But there you go. Your controls are again pretty cut and dry. There is a rather wonderful camera system in the game. So I definitely like camera smoothing. Oh, it's fantastic. It is chef's kiss. And I highly recommend that you put that there. And then what we have over here is camera shake. Now I will say this. If you experience motion sickness when you play computer games, I know several streamers myself who suffer from it, and you may be one of those. The game, when you place down buildings and do other functionality, things like that, it will cause the camera to shake. It's just a fun little gimmick that I wouldn't even say a gimmick. It is a feature that they put into the game, and it's been there from the beginning, and it's really, really cool, really, really enjoyable. I like it myself, but I understand if there are people here who don't. So in an effort for those people who may want to watch this series and do experience that, I recommend turning camera shake off. I will turn it off for you just so you aren't having to deal with it on this series. Then of course you have several key bindings. Look through those, figure out what you want to do and how you want to do it, and we'll be right as rain there. Last but certainly not least in the settings is language accessibility. We have several languages available into the game that you can pick from as you want, and then an interface scale that will scale up depending on how you want to play. Now, I'm going to keep things at 1.0, so they're the most functional to my screen. You can do whatever you want. Now, that is all it is for the settings. Figure out what you want to do. Take your time, pause the video, and figure out what you're going to do. And we're going to go ahead and dive into a new game. And here are the new game settings. Now, we're not going to spend an exorbitant amount of time here because, well, we're just not going to. But what we're going to do here, we're going to go with Sir Tutorial, and we're going to choose this guy. I always like choosing this guy because he most reminds me of me. That's a personal thing. So you can choose who you want to out of all of these portraits. That is not something that you can change. Perhaps in the future, perhaps not. We don't know. What's really cool over here is that you have a huge array of different coat of arms things that you can do. Different patterns across the board to where you can really just have a lot of fun with however you want to do this. There's so many options. But there's going to be a separate video up above, which will eventually pop up because I'm still working on videos. But long story short, if you follow the instructions in that video, you will be able to upload your own custom texture. In this case, I have my own branded logo behind a wooden shield wall, and that's going to be my coat of arms. Now, I've seen people who've actually been able to import their old family coat of arms in, and I think that's super awesome. And if you have the ability to do that, you have editing software, things of that nature, I highly recommend that you do it just to add an awesome level of immersion. But we're going to go ahead and keep with this. Typically what I would do if it were me and how I want to work things, for instance, you can go down to your tiling and we can simply have that right there. This is my default option because I really, really like how this looks. Pretty cut and dry. I really enjoy it. But you can totally mess with the scale of things. You can have them go upside down. You can increase the number of instances. It's a really awesome functionality to create your own custom coat of arms. But here we go. We're going to roll with that. And next up, right into it, we have our game setup. by default, there are 3 different settings, and then you can modify therein. Rise to Prosperity is going to be your completely peaceful city builder. There are no enemies, there are no anythings, and you could even do it to where there were no weather events, your approval can go down, etc., etc. So what we have here are the exact same parameters, just with different settings. So the end goal here is to reach the large town settlement. You don't have an off-map adversary. No raiders, no bandit camps, no bandit camp spawn limits. In my opinion, that's really, really hard, but that's okay. Your starting season, which is literally the season of the year that you start in. The game has all 4 seasons, like in real life. You have starting supplies. You don't need an armament delivery if you're doing a completely peaceful playthrough. Your resident requirements. So if the residents don't have their needs met, they will not be able to upgrade, and it cannot grow. You have your approval, which we'll get into a lot of this into the game itself. But approval factors such as homelessness, being fed, taxation, things of that nature. Well placement. The game by default has underground water veins. You could call them veins, just areas where you can see where you can build. You can turn that off to where it can be wells can be placed anywhere. It's whatever you want to do. This is a little more realistic, quote unquote. And then you do have weather events. This is a big one because if your supplies get soaked, you'll get a warning. And then if they get soaked again, they will disappear. So you want to be able to manage that well. There's also the experience of droughts and rare fires, etc., etc. Now, all of these can be modified. So these are the defaults. Your Rise to Prosperity is a completely peaceful city builder. Restoring the Peace is your normal setting, as close as I could say it, where you have an off-map adversary. He is balanced, not super frequent raids, etc., etc. Or on the edge, where the end growth can be growth or domination, and in which case you do have other things going on. So for me, if I was an absolute beginner and I wanted to experience the game as it was meant to be, I would do Restoring the Peace. But one thing I will say is that if you want a little more of a challenge, you can set your AI aggressiveness to aggressive, which means he will press claims towards the player's region, which means you'll have to aggressively fight against him. Raider frequency. You can have initial bandit camps, which they will steal resources. So you want to be able to tackle them. But, and I'm going to tell you this right now, bandit camps get you gold, which you'll need, or silver, whatever the treasury is. And that's a really good jump start for your beginning of your settlement. So I highly recommend you at least have 3 of them at a minimum. And then your bandit camp spawn limit. Basically, bandit camps will stop spawning on the map once they reach 5 of them. That way you kind of always have something to do. Now, if you really wanted a very peaceful city building experience that was just as minimally intrusive as you want, as physically possible, I would do all of this. I would double your starting supplies. I would move residential requirements to tolerant, low penalty approval, unconstrained well placement, and weather events. This is literally like, I don't have a lot of time after work, and I literally just want to build a medieval city and not have to worry about much. I just want to build. I don't care about economics. I don't care about anything like that. That's your setting. For us, though, we will do Restoring the Peace. Domination is going to be it. We are going to be aggressive. We are going to have 4 initial bandit camps. Random bandit camp spawn limit. We'll do 5 just for kicks and giggles. Starting supplies are standard. Residential requirements are balanced. Medium penalty. Underground water, and balanced. Now, the game will eventually have more maps. Currently, there is only 1 default. You just have a random region that you spawn in. Now, what we are going to do, we are going to pop into a game, and we probably won't even hit play and place down anything until after we have explained the user experience, or the user interface rather, and we may not even start then. Again, we're trying to condense these things into very topic-related, topic-heavy things, but I'm still very, very excited because it does look great. The experience that you get when you first drop in is going to be wonderful. I hope you're ready for it. Let's go ahead and begin. All right, look at that. Ooh, that was a nice drop in. I love it. All right, welcome to what your settlement will start out as every single time, regardless of the region you are in. This is what you get access to. This is your screen that you will look at and you will need to experience the game from the most. We do have a new message. We're going to go ahead and look at that real quick. Victory condition dominance. Build up your town, your manor, and when ready, press claims towards regions owned by your opponent. Once a claim has been pressed, be ready for battle. Great. Claim all the opponent's regions. That is our goal. Now, we're not even going to look at any of this for the time being. We are instead going to look at all of the elements that are on your borders, your outside screens. And this is the user interface aspect of the game. This is going to take a while. There's a lot to look through, but I'm very excited and I hope you're ready to look through it with me. Starting over here with your population overview. Everything over here is a regional setting for the most part, and it will give you an idea of stats about your population inside of the region you are looking at. If we were to, I'm going to go ahead and pop out here, but don't worry about it. If we were to go over into a new region, you would see that that would change if we were to have claimed it. So we're not going to worry about that for just yet. But in this region of Nuslo, we have 5 unassigned families. So these are families that do not have an assigned job. These are necessary for construction as well. So you will need at least 1 unassigned family. But long story short, they will utilize everything they can in order to construct buildings. So in kind of once you're established, I like having 2 to 3 unassigned families in my settlement, constantly being able to address buildings very quickly. Your unassigned families will use the ox, which is right here, this wonderful boyo right here, a Herman the ox. They will use him in order to start constructing buildings. Look at that mad lad. He looks super great. So those are your unassigned families. You now have assigned families. These are families that have been assigned a job at a level 1 thing, just so you know. Now, the thing about these families is they are exactly that. They are families, meaning that you will have a worker, which is typically the male, typically but not always. And then you will have the female of the family will be the person who runs the stall or does menial tasks in between. So these work as a cohesive unit. This is not just one person doing one thing. This is a family, a cohesive unit here that you can see that is working together to do the job they are assigned. Next up is your living space. How many families the region can currently accommodate using the availability of homes. Now, burgage plots are the technical term for your housing. So I will switch intermediately between housing and burgage plots. So if you see me do that, you'll definitely know. But this is the living spaces available to them. Your total population here, this is your, obviously, total population. And this will increase as you construct burgage plots. So what we'll see later on is that once houses have been created, people will start moving in. Those families will start meeting up with their significant others and start to be able to contribute to the region as a whole. A reminder that this is a region. This is the Nuslo's. We're actually going to relabel this real quick. We'll get to this in a minute. We're going to label this Tutorial Town. So the region of Tutorial Town has a total of 10 population, which will again increase as we build more burgage plots, as we start increasing the housing capacity of said region. Next up is your approval. Now, this controls the overall population growth and the morale of your militia. This is very, very important because higher approval will actually increase the rate at which families join your settlement if there is space. So this is where things like homelessness comes in or hunger comes in. Being cold during the winter, having corpses in your region that are just lying there, those are things that will affect approval. And again, once you get above, I believe it is 75%, you will kind of maximize the amount of people that are able to move in within a month, which I do believe is 2 per month. So 2 entire families, 2 entire workforce families per month once this gets above 75. It's a little bit less than that, obviously. We only have 50% approval starting out. And so it is going to be one of our primary objectives to get everyone housed as much as we can, working the region, and then also make sure that they are fed. Your public order. As it mentions here, this governs the chance of crime occurring as well as citizens permanently turning to banditry. It takes a lot for your approval and public order to decrease to the point to where they are turning to banditry. Typically, I haven't even seen this really happen unless you really, really mismanage things. So just keep an eye on it. As you can see, recent 30 days as to previous, this is just like the approval. But you'll see here, there'll be different modifiers and factors so you can see what you're doing correctly or incorrectly. So this is your population overview for the region. Gives you a good breakdown of what happens. Right here is regional wealth. As mentioned, this is a regional. You may have 50 gold, whatever this is, in Tutorial Town, but the next town over will have a different amount. You'll use this regional wealth to upgrade your burgage plots if they have backyard extensions. We'll get there. You can import goods with it through the trading post to be able to import supplies or armaments or things like that. And then you will collect regional wealth just as things upgrade and improve. You'll also be able to tax your people once you build a manor, and that taxation takes from their regional wealth and puts it into your personal treasury. So regional wealth is very, very important. And again, why I'm going to say right now, we want to focus on bandits as quickly as possible, because we will be able to send the loot from those bandit camps to the local region, which will always be us in Tutorial Town until we expand, and that's going to really give us a good jump start. Next up, you have your livestock. This is the total stable space and pasture space of all of the livestock in your region. Again, regional. So right now we only have one oxen and he is currently unassigned. There are certain buildings that you are able to dedicate an oxen to. So for instance, the lumber camp, we could have a permanent oxen stationed for the lumber camp, in which case he will only bring logs from where they cut them down to the lumber camp itself. Otherwise, they will just be used in general. One of the big tips here that I'm going to say is that right now we can only accommodate one unless we upgrade it to a small stable. We're not going to do that. But what I would recommend is building another hitching outpost and buying another oxen pretty soon, so you can have 2 free oxmen working the field or working all the construction. It'll be a lot faster. But we have oxen, horses, and mules. Those will be used for various things. And then you have your pasture space, which is for sheep and lambs. Sheep are used to make wool, to harvest wool. That's more of a functionality that we won't get to in the first couple of episodes. And lambs, to be honest, I don't quite remember off the top of my head currently what lambs are used for. But this will give you your pasture space limitation. So at one point, if you get beyond that, your sheep or your oxen, your horses, your mules, if you don't have space rather for them, they have the tendency to run off, walk off, and you won't ever see them again. So you definitely want to make sure that you're mindful of your livestock space, both in stables and your pastures. The last section over here to the left of Tutorial Town is the number of months before supplies run out. As it says here, every burgage plot consumes 1 food and 1 fuel per month, with fuel consumption doubling in the winter. Some workplaces also consume fuel, like the bloomery, to make iron slabs, things of that nature. They will use that fuel as well. So right now we have food enough for 4 months, and we aren't currently consuming fuel, but we will want to get that started ASAP. It will be one of the first things that we address when we get buildings running. So again, all of this is regional. Actually, everything up here on the top UI is regional. It will be different when we claim a new area, when we move into a new area, and that's really, really nice. And the default T key will automatically return you to kind of the epicenter of your region. So we have Tutorial Town, and when we hover over Tutorial Town, we'll see that its current level is Settlers Camp. There's not a lot going on here. We just started. Each level gets you a development point that you can use to specialize your town. Our next settlement is Small Village, and we get to Small Village when we built 5 burgage plots, or again, if we built 5 houses. And we'll get to building in just a little bit, hopefully in the next episode. But that's going to be you hover over this at any point, you'll see what you need in order to level up. We're going to click on Tutorial Town like I did to rename the place. And this may seem overwhelming, but it's really not too bad. So what we have here are 3 tabs: development, policies, and production. You're going to spend a majority of your time in this menu screen on development. Every time you level up your town, you get 1 development point, for a total of 6 development points able to be had across gameplay at this time. So that means inside of all of this, you're only going to be able to use 6 of them. This is intentional. This is purposeful, because what we want to focus on, what the game focuses on, is regional specialization. So for instance, we're not going to get into the specifics, but if you had a lot of mining resources, you're probably going to want to go down into charcoal burning to get into deep mining and all of those things. Now, you will notice that a lot of these are locked behind early access work in progresses. That is intentional. As game develops, obviously, you will be able to unlock more of this, and things will be rocking that way. But long story short, development is broken up into 4 areas. You have your farming, you have trade, you have production or industry, and then you have food, for lack of a better term, like natural food. I'm not going to go into hardcore recommendations right now because it does depend largely on how you want to play. But what I will say is charcoal burning is one of the best starting development points because it converts 1 firewood into 2 charcoal, making refueling, there we go, making refueling twice as efficient. I highly recommend it. It is an extra industrial step, which means you are using up 2 people essentially at the start to make 2 charcoal, but charcoal is going to be definitely worthwhile in the future. I also recommend trade logistics. Trade logistics basically means that the cost of establishing a trade port or trade route rather, in order to purchase any goods and import them or export them, will be set to 25 regional wealth. Some of the exports do get quite pricey. I think your armaments are your most expensive, where it's something like, say, 150 regional wealth in order to establish the trade route. So this basically knocks everything down to 25 regional wealth, jump-starting your trade and allowing you to be able to produce potentially more regional wealth early in the game. But again, it is entirely how you want to play. Farming is the most fleshed out, with things like a heavy plow to be able to bring an oxen in and plow fields faster, to bakeries as an extension to be able to use. You can even use sheep to restore lost fertilization in your farms. But again, these are all unlockable and you only have 6 of them. So if I was a betting man, I'd go charcoal burning and or trade logistics, then go into my heavy plow and into my bakery. But that's just me. You play how you want and explore all of the different things here just to be able to have some fun with it. And again, make it your own settlement. You don't have to follow the exact same route I do. You will play differently than I will play, and that is okay. Now, development points aside, we do have policies. When you build a manor, right now, I think you can only have 1 policy, possibly 2. And these are all, yeah, that's right. Okay, we do only have a level 1 manor that we can build, and in which case, you would have 2 of these options to choose from. So it's something to consider. You don't have to worry about that right now. Production, there currently isn't anything here. This is a very work in progress section of the game. I just want to let you know that it exists. You'll just spend, like I said, 95% of your time of this thing right here in the development area. All right, right below it are some notifications for you. Right now, we have 5 homeless people. Now, these people wait for their burgage plots. Causes a loss of approval, possibly a freezing in the winter. Homeless people cannot be part of a militia unit either. So you won't have homelessness outside of this initial starting thing, which in my opinion, maybe that'll change in the future. That'd be kind of a cool feature to see, where maybe people move to the region. I'm like, oh crap, I thought there was housing here and there's not. But regardless, we do have 5 homeless families waiting for homes, and approval will drop. Now, if you were playing on a little bit more of a hardcore mode where you didn't have a lot of starting resources, you could upgrade to a worker camp. Provides crude living space for 5 families. This can't be upgraded or expanded, and it just gives you a little more of a established worker camp before you start building houses. Now, that will not remove the homelessness factor. It will simply give them a little more protection from the elements that'll make them a little happier. All right, to the right side of the tutorial town thing, also recent events, I forgot to mention that. Recent events will pop up here. These are your materials for your region. And this little button here is a fun thing that I've never ever touched because I like what it shows rather than what it has the potential to show. So right now it is currently showing the surplus goods for all of this. And as it says here, for instance, if you have 5 planks and you place a building that costs 5 planks, your stock remains 5, but it will show as 0. So long story short, we have 8 timber now. If I place down 4 burgage plots at 2 timber each, your timber is still there. You still have 8 timber, but it will show up as 0 because you have used it. This gives you a more real-time accurate thing that takes factors into what's already been designated. Now, if we were to go here, you're not going to see a difference right now, but this would mean that it would still always show up as 8 timber, even though I placed down 4 burgage plots, because it's showing your total goods. This is far less confusing, and I highly recommend it even for any players. I don't have a reason to go down to total goods unless my reason would be to be like, okay, it says that I have 100 food right now, but when I go to surplus, it says I have 0. Why is that? For me, the total goods is more of an investigative stance that you then figure out what's going on and you move into surplus again. Now, onto the different goods. We currently have goods broken up into several categories, and while it's overwhelming, again, hovering over them gives you a good idea on what's going on. And as a heads up, we're not going to do this super yet. There we go. Savings already finished. That's what I mean. But basically what's going to happen here is that in any relevant area in which you are going to build or construct or interact with, it's going to give you the appropriate levels of what you need in order to build that. We can see here, if we build our burgage plots, it's going to be like, hey, by the way, you have timber and you have stone and you have tools, and that's it. When you're outside of the building menu, it goes into your default. So we have construction, what's needed in order to construct buildings. You have your food, various types of food for your people to survive. You have your fuel. There's that firewood and charcoal again. You have your crops. These are raw resources that need to be utilized further down the road. Wheat needs to be refined into flour. Flax gets refined into yarn, barley into ale, rye into flour as well. You have your crafting materials. These are your refined materials, as I just mentioned, grain and flour. Actually, excuse me, wheat gets turned into grain, pardon me, which then gets turned into flour. This has base level and crafted, so hides are still being utilized by the population, but it can be turned into leather, wool, yarn, linen, etc., etc. These include industrial materials as well. You have your commodities, which are your third level, basically, in some instances, where you have cloaks or candles, ale and shoes. And then you also have your military stance. This has all of the things to equip your units with. Now, as a heads up, all of the weapons and shields are a necessity in order to have a militia unit. So we need warbows in order to have archers. You need sidearms to be able to have that militia. Spears, large and small shields are required in some units. It is the helmets, the mail plate and gamisons. Those are additional features which will essentially level up your militia units, but they are not a requirement to start them. Now, once we build certain buildings, I do believe it's the granary and the warehouse and some burgage plots, we will get armaments as a shipment in by default, which will help us tackle the bandits. So just a heads up there. But yeah, that's your regional goods overall. Pretty cut and dry. You'll experience them throughout the entirety of the game. It'll all make sense. Next up, we have our personal overview. This is my character, as you can see here. This is my coat of arms, as it were, that I uploaded from the beginning. No matter what your design is, it will always show up here. And it does feature some other things that we need to work on. Now, not to be confused with regional wealth, but you do have a treasury. This is your personal money that you can use to expand into new regions. We'll get into that late game, basically. You can hire retinue units with them, which are your personal retinue of soldiers, which occurs after you build a manor. You can hire mercenaries with them as well. So there's lots of things you can do with your treasury. You gain treasury either by dissolving those bandit camps and choosing to import it into your own treasury, or by taxing your people. All well and good. We do have annual royal tax to be paid. I do not remember if this is implemented yet in the game. It was a feature in the demo, but I'll be quite frank, I don't think it's implemented right now. You have your king's favor. This is definitely something that you can acquire. However, it's not super utilized at the moment because diplomacy is still very much work in progress. And then you have your influence. This is your primary currency, as it were, that you will use to press claims on the regional map. By pressing M, you'll hit the regional map, and you'll see an overview of what the map looks like. So what you'll do, you'll see here, you could claim with influence or claim with the king's favor. We're not going to do either of those because we don't have it. But you will notice, there's a lot of bandit camps. I'm so excited to be able to get to these. But you'll be able to claim with 1,000 influence. You'll gain influence. Let's get back over here. You gain influence by doing things like enacting policies, raising settlement levels, and conquering bandit camps, as well as upgrading churches and manors. Correct. Churches can only be upgraded once right now. Manors cannot be upgraded at all. That is a very heavy work in progress feature as well. Moving right along to your bottom right corner. You hover over the current month that it is, and you'll see the spring or the season and what current year it is, as well as a breakdown on what each season brings. March through May, frequent raining, seasonal deposits grow, which are your things like your berries, etc. Summer, your crops grow, possibility of droughts, etc., etc. You see all of that. And again, I mention here that firewood consumption doubles during the winter. And then sheep shearing is forbidden as well, just so they don't die. But that gives you an idea on what you need. Once you understand where the seasons are, you'll be able to react appropriately, as it were. You also have your time settings. You can time forward and backwards by pressing X and C, or X and Z, excuse me. X to go forward, Z to go backwards. That's a nice little feature instead of coming down here and pressing every time. It all works out. And then the last little bit here are your game tools. There's a lot of functionality in here, and this is where you will be building and kind of interacting with the world around you the most. Roads are very simple. Now, what you can do is make them a little more complicated, but in a really good way. So we're going to do a little bit of foresight just for kicks and giggles here. What we're going to do is we're going to figure out where we want to place our first road, or at least a first road. We are going to rocket. We are going to rocket right here. Now we're going to be playing a little city skylines-ish, where I like conforming to the contour lines. And you'll see here, simply by clicking with your left mouse button, you're able to draw the path that you want to draw. Now, right-clicking deletes path nodes that you've set down, which is super duper handy. And then you'll also know if you hold down Control, you can kind of modify the curvature to how you want it to be. Now, they can get real funky, I'm not going to lie. But this kind of lets you be able to be like, okay, I got some smoother-ish road functionality here that I want to work with. And then hitting the hammer button will place that road down. Simple as that. Now, roads do have benefits. Your villagers will prioritize walking on them. Whether or not they walk faster, I don't honestly have an idea on if it actually affects that. But this is where you'll want to kind of lay your city out. Now, I will emphasize that this is a organic style city builder. The game looks best when you build it ungrid-like, in my opinion. And if you want to be a little more historical, you can roll along those lines as well. And so I'm not going to build grids here. I'm not going to worry about that. If anything, what I would do is I would start pushing through this, because it's in between two small hills and you'll be able to build from that. But don't feel like you can totally grid it 100%. But don't feel like you have to. This isn't City Skylines. This isn't SimCity. This is an organic city builder that you can build wherever and however you want to. Next up, though, we do have construction, these are tool tipped, by the way, if you want to be that person, which is not a problem at all. This gives you access to all the buildings that you can build, and then any requirements necessary if you need to unlock them. You'll be referencing this throughout the game entirely, so I recommend that you get very familiar with it. I still struggle with like, oh wait, that needs to go into here, I need to go into this category, but it's all well and good. This will provide everything that you need. Next up is your army. We currently don't have any army, nor do we have the ability to even raise one. Well, we do have the ability to raise it, but it doesn't do anything because we have no armaments. But you'll see here we have options. We have militia footman, we have spear militia, we have pole arm, and we have archer. And you'll notice in parentheses this shows the region that it's in as well. So you'll see that we would need recruits and we would need armaments. Now again, these are just armaments that are necessary to have the unit. We don't need the helmets, the mail armor, the plate armor, or the gambesons, although those are very good things to have. So long story short, we would be able to go here. We're actually going to go spear militia, for instance. A maximum of 36 people are possible. You'll see we're missing everything required, and we could hire them right off the bat. Now, mercenaries are also in the game. They require your treasury, your personal treasury, as mentioned earlier. You can hire them, but it will cost 90 treasury per month of service. So this is good if you're in a pinch, or if you're just that wealthy and you want to hire quite a few. You can totally hire quite a few if you want to. But just be aware of that situation, that it is per month, and the months do go by quick potentially. So you may be drain that treasury a lot faster than you anticipated. Next up, we have our map. This shows you a map overview of the regions. Again, this is where your press claims, where you'll be able to see where bandit camps are, where you'll be able to see where you want to expand into in the future, things of that nature. This is also where you'll react diplomatically. This doesn't have anything that does anything right now, to be quite honest. So I wouldn't recommend, unless you just really want to have some fun with it. Yes, another dog has been, you know, sent here, dissing the bandits and the outlaws a little bit. But this is where you'll have that interaction with the map. We come back here to our home. Next, we have the help. This is a very useful thing, which is still work in progress. It's being fleshed out. But this gives you a lot of really positive directions, figuring out what you need to do and how they need to be approached. Again, it is a little bit just work in progress. The economy, I think, is the most fleshed out of all of them, but you'll be able to utilize that. And then you have some in-game settings that aren't dependent on you going to the main menu. There are a lot of things that are in the main menu that are set up here. But you'll see right here, this is a really cool thing. This is my live FPS. So you can see right now with nothing going on, I'm rocking about 90 to 100 FPS, which is more than I need, but I do like to keep it untapped just in case it rocks that way. All your settings are here, your gameplay here for your cosmetic day and nights, for instance. All of the things, for the most part. We could do this. Look at that. That's a mess. This is almost too much. This is just right. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the user interface aspect of the game, as well as your settings. Again, very in-depth. There's a lot going on here. But I hope that it gives you a solid grasp on everything that you're looking at to be able to understand how to play once we start playing. We haven't even really hit play yet, just by showing the timestamps. But we will get to that in the next tutorial series for absolute beginners. So thank you so much for hanging out with me today. This is part 1. We will continue this in the next episode, where we will start laying the basic groundworks of our settlement in very much user-friendly tutorial style aspects, so that way you can understand everything that needs to go on and all the things you need to consider there. So if you enjoyed the video, do all the things such as subscribe to the channel, leave any comments in the comment section below, and give that video a like as well. It's greatly appreciated. Share it around to the people that you know and love so they can play the game too. If you want to support the channel, you can become a YouTube member, where you will get early access to this tutorial series as much as I can, but you'll also be able to get early access to other videos where they're not embargoed by other things. The last thing, if you want to support the channel financially while also benefiting yourself on release day, you can head over to my Nexus GG account, where I have Manor Lords, where I get a small commission. For the purchase of that, you get a completely, totally legal Steam key, nothing fishy about it whatsoever, and you'll be able to play the game on release while also supporting the channel in that way. Thank you once again for watching this episode 1 on this tutorial for absolute beginners and Manor Lords. This is Havoc, and I'll see you in the next one.